What do you think is more the reason Ben wants to leave?
Nah, it's definitely the former, Mark. It's definitely an organizational thing. And the thing is, this isn't necessarily a brand new thing that just kind of sprung up after that Hawks series. This, from everything I've been told over the past year, this dates back to early last season when Ben was mentioned and offered in trade talks for James Harden. His representation was told to be prepared for a potential move by the Sixers front office. They were at least informed that it was a possibility. Nothing ever came to fruition, but from everything I heard, starting right then, that rubbed Ben kind of the wrong way. He felt that he had established himself as an all-star, borderline star player in the NBA, and that the Sixers were willing to move on for him, even for a player as good as James Harden. Even though it didn't end up happening, that's kind of started the wheels turning in this process. Even though Ben said all the right things at that time in the press conferences, he said he understood the business side of things, and he's still focused on bringing a championship to Philly, which is funny now in hindsight. But, he said all the right things at the time, but there was some hurt there. And then that was exacerbated and, came to a head following how poorly he played. And then that he felt that Doc and Joel didn't have his back necessarily was, I guess you could say the straw that broke the back in that situation. But this is something that's been at least simmering for, going on a year almost at this point.
So I think the typical Philadelphia fan would love to see a guy in Ben Simmons' situation, even if he ultimately passed up on the situation of dunking and going to the foul line and all that. I think most of Philadelphia would want the athlete, in this case Ben Simmons, to go into the offseason with the attitude of, you know what, my team is right, the city is right, the front office is right, I need to be better, I need to start expanding my game, I need to be a better foul shooter, I need to be more aggressive and more often, I need to have a consistent outside, mid-range jump shot. Why do you think that is not Ben Simmons' reaction? Why do you think he's not reacting that I think the typical Philadelphia fan would want any athlete in his situation right now to react? Why isn't he just thinking, no, on me, I got to be better?
Mark, at this point, I think it's fair to say that it's a character issue with Ben. He's been defended. He's been babied by the organization. He's been defended by the fans, by a lot of the media members. I've always been a pretty big Ben Simmons supporter and pointed to, all the positives that he brought to the floor. When people would harp on the lack of an outside shot, I would be the first to say, hey, he's the best defender in the league to me. He's one of the best playmakers. He's this and that. But, for the fact that after he knows he played poorly in that series, and there just seems to be a lack of, him willingness on his part to look in the mirror and accept his part of the thing. I think he's letting the fact that he was hurt from, what we were just talking about, the initial trade talks, that was still lingering. And then that, I think, added to the poor play. But, if you want to be moved, that's one thing that happens in the NBA all the time. What doesn't happen is a player that's, still has 4 years left on his contract to potentially hold out on his team. It comes off obviously as selfish. He's not thinking about the organization. Kendrick Perkins was on ESPN today talking about how he thought it was selfish from the perspective of that it sets a bad precedent for younger players to kind of look at and see, like, he signed this contract, at least be there to, see it through, put in the work until you are traded. Usually when a player holds out in the NBA, it's to get the contract that Ben already has. It's a really unique situation to see a guy that's been rewarded by the organization after a few years to basically say that he wants nothing to do with the team. So, it's kind of new waters that's going on right here. And I think Ben, ultimately he's going to get his way. He's not going to be on the Sixers long term. But, for him to develop as a player and take those steps that you mentioned on the lead in to grow his game offensively, it's going to take him to look in the mirror and realize, like, hey, I am an all-star player. I am a defensive player of the year runner-up. But to be the guy that I can be and the people want me to be, some of it is on me too. And, we just haven't seen that so far from Ben.
I'll be honest with you, Michael, and I hate to be bitter, but, man, if he goes somewhere else, and he, not just against Philly, because I think when he does play against the Sixers, I think he'll have that, the overdrive button clicked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I would hate to see him leave. This is why at the end of the year, I wasn't just like, trade him for a rack of basketballs.
Right.
But I would hate to see him go somewhere else, improve his game, take those steps that we all knew he should have been taking anyway, and then grow into that legit MVP candidate. I always go back to, he got an MVP vote, not a first place vote, but he got an MVP vote for an NBA player who doesn't shoot a basketball. That's how good he is at everything else. But I'd hate for him to grow in that role of a perennial MVP candidate elsewhere. And then that's when I know it'll be turned around on us, that we, the fan base of Philadelphia rather, ran Ben Simmons out of town.
Well, you know that's going to happen, right, Mark? It's only that's just a formality at this point.
Yeah, right. That's why I'm having you on as a national writer. I'm like, no, Michael, can you just do me a favor? Talk to all your friends, text them all, and just say, hey, we didn't do it. It wasn't the fan base of Philly.
No, but in seriousness, though, what you said, I think, is part of the reason that that he's still on the team. Like, the Sixers do know how valuable he is to the team and how much he brings to the floor. And that's why people made fun of Daryl Morey all summer for having this high asking price. But the Sixers were always operating with the idea that, shoot for the stars. If it doesn't work out, we'll bring him back into the fold next season. And, from what I heard before the initial reports came out that he wasn't going to, report to the Sixers at all, was that the Sixers were not only willing to bring him back in the short term, but they were open-minded enough to be, to say, we'll bring him back. And, hey, if he shows that improvement that we've been waiting to see, if he's really clicking, at the beginning of the season leading up to the trade deadline, maybe we'll leave the door open that we won't trade him and he'll continue to be a long-term piece of this franchise. Obviously, that shifted when Ben kind of took control of the situation by saying that he wasn't going to report. But for the Sixers, they were always willing to, bring him back into the fold. And I do think there is that. I don't want to say that the front office is nervous, but there is that feeling that, if we trade this guy and get, a less than ideal return, there's still the potential at 25 years old that he could reach that ceiling somewhere else and be a guy that we have to watch for the next 8 years and be like, man, if only we still had him, that type of
right.
situation.
If he would have chose to be better when he was here.